Hey everyone, this is Bill Krieger from the Veterans Archives podcast, where we preserve and share the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Really, anywhere you choose to get your podcast, you should be able to find us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social media to help us reach more veterans and supporters. We are a nonprofit, and this service is completely free for veterans. Every story matters, and every voice deserves to be heard. Spread the word, honor our heroes, and join us on this mission. Follow, share, and tune in, because their story should never be forgotten. Learn more at veteransarchives.org. We'll see you there. Welcome to part 4 of our 5-part series with Don Roach, who served in the United States Marine Corps.
And 2 guys each grabbed an ankle, and they're towing me out of there. I'm like a tail gunner. Only I'm on the ground in the sand.
Being dragged.
So I emptied my magazine, got up, reloaded the weapon, and by then we've gone around a corner or something, and they couldn't see us anymore. But I lost my new hat. And I am just incensed. I got a hole in my back, and I lost my new hat. This has not been a fun 24 hours.
No, not at all.
And boy, just let somebody cross me now, you know. Well, I only follow orders, you know. Our platoon gets moved up to position in front of Dodge City. We have a brand new platoon sergeant. All the officers, platoon commanders and up, were called back to the CP group. Mm-hmm. So the colonel has ordered all the officers back to his spot, which is way back in the rear. It's going to take them 20 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
So they're all running back that way on the double. As they get close to his position, he calls out and orders all the NCOs to assault the tree line.
So he pulled his officers.
Yep.
And then he
ordered the assault.
Wow.
And again, we have no supporting fire.
Right.
There's been no artillery. There's no mortars. There's no gunships. I mean, none of that fancy go-get-'em Army stuff. Just Marine bodies. So, of course, we assault the tree line. Well, NVA resistance is strong.
Uh-huh.
Mostly automatic, semi and full automatic weapons. We don't get much closer than about 30 meters from the tree line, and of course, everybody's pinned down in the open sand, and the sun is going higher and higher. Well, it gets up to about 110 in the shade. Marines have been out there for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. They've got very little water. They're baking in the sun. You can't move much or you get your head blown off. And it's not like we had time to dig positions, you know, you just
it was
scoop
standard
sand
assault,
out of your
right?
face and get down.
Yeah.
So one by one, Marines are passing out from the heat. It's called heat exhaustion. Mm-hmm. And the corpsmen have recognized what this is. And there's probably 2 or 3 corpsmen for every platoon. So there's about 9 corpsmen out there, 3 platoons, trying to drag these guys away from the lines to doctor them, to take care of them.
Yeah.
And it's not going well. So we eventually hear our helicopters coming in. These are Sea Knights with the tandem rotors. Mm-hmm. Sea Knights are coming in. They're carrying food and whatever else they were ordered to bring, ammo or whatever. And cans of water, 5-gallon cans of water. And poncho liners. The poncho liners were used to fill old bomb craters and things. So then the next trip, the Sea Knights brought out ice. And they literally poured the ice on top of the poncho liners. And that gave them a place to put the Marines with a heat exhaustion, try to get their temperature under control.
Yeah.
So one by one, these Marines are getting dragged out, one at a time. And I mean, the corpsmen are doing this under fire.
It's a lot of work.
And they're dragging these guys back, throwing them into an ice pit, going back for another one. All those corpsmen should have had a Medal of Honor, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, my little group, my platoon, is at the bottom end of this operation where there's a bend around the Ville. And the new platoon sergeant, he's just been promoted to sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
He has no idea what to do. I mean, the lieutenant is who knows where, he's AWOL.
Right.
And he's got all these guys itching to fight, but nowhere to fight. They don't know which way to go. So I said to him, let me check it out. Just keep everybody down. Like, I don't want any help.
Yeah.
So I go out to check the thing out. So I'm doing my lizard thing, crawling up, and I get to within 5 meters of the Ville. And I can pretty much tell there's a lot of fortified positions. I mean, they've got people down there with automatic weapons. And in front of me at a big tree, an NVA steps out, plain as day, puts his brand new AK-47 against the tree, shiny new weapon. He's wearing a brand new creased uniform, got a new haircut. He looks like a poster boy.
Uh-huh.
He leans against the tree like Marlene Dietrich with his knee up and lights his cigarette, and he's holding it European style, They've got a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
And he's smoking this, like a Frenchman, he's smoking a cigarette, just watching what's going on. I've already sighted him in, and the biggest decision I'm making is, do I shoot him in the chest, or do I just blow his head off?
Yeah.
And I've decided I'm going to take his head off his shoulders and put it in the lap of his buddies, psych him out.
Uh-huh.
And a 2.23 round will do that. If it hits anything hard, it'll disintegrate.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll tumble, and that'll be the end of whatever that was. It'll take an arm off, a leg. You shoot a guy in the hip, guaranteed he's going to lose a leg. You can watch it fly off. So I'm sighting in on this guy's head. I'm already squeezing the trigger when two Marines jump on me from behind and force me down, force my head and my weapon down.
Uh-huh.
And I am ready to strangle them. First off, what are you doing out here? And second, why would you give my position away? And third, I'm about to kill an NVA. What the hell are you doing? So they're whispering, don't shoot, might be friendly. And I'm looking at this guy like, you're an idiot. He's wearing an NVA uniform, carrying an AK-47. How could he be friendly? I didn't say it. I mean,
right, you're thinking it, though.
I'm still trying to figure out what to do without getting killed out there.
Yeah.
So we actually, somehow, the guy with the cigarette picked up his rifle and disappeared into the tree line. The two guys got off me, and we made it back without getting killed. And one of those guys was a guy we called Lucky. He was a Cajun.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting personality, complex, strong as an ox. He'd carry a 50 caliber machine gun with the barrel on it over his shoulder. I mean, I never saw anybody else do that.
That's a strong person right there.
He handled that thing like it was a toy.
Yeah.
And he wasn't any bigger than I was, but he was just rippled with muscles all over. He'd been hard labor all his life.
Mm-hmm.
So the Marine Corps was a breeze to him. It was a vacation. But Lucky had problems following orders. He was not well disciplined. One example was one day on a weekday off, we had a bunch of guys given time to go into Da Nang. Freedom Hill, whatever they wanted. And Lucky found somebody to sell him a pistol. So he bought a 38 snub-nosed revolver. I don't know where he's going to get ammunition for that stupid thing, but I guess it was loaded when he bought it.
Right, so he at least had 6 rounds.
So he's got that concealed on his person. And we're on a patrol one afternoon. We broke for chow. Everybody's just relaxing. And all of a sudden, there's a bang. Of course, everybody assumes it's incoming, So we all jump up with our weapons ready to go. Well, it was Lucky standing there with a smoking 38 in his hand. He was practicing his quick draw, and he shot a tree. At least he hit the tree.
Right, and not himself or somebody else.
He didn't kill anybody else. So the lieutenant relieved him of the illegal weapon.
Uh-huh.
He never saw that again. I'm not so sure the lieutenant didn't keep it, but he relieved him of the weapon. And Lucky and I, he was with another squad, but he and I had been getting along okay. And one night, he had a can of something from home. He was heating over a heat tab.
Uh-huh.
And I saw these white chunks floating around. I said, "What the hell is that?" And he says, "That's gumbo, chicken gumbo with dumplings." And I asked, "What is a dumpling?" He says, "Oh, it's pastry."
Mm-hmm.
So he gave me a sample to try in my canteen cup. It was really pretty good. And I told him so. I said, "Wow, that tastes fantastic." He says, "Yeah, I've been eating this all my life." I said, "No wonder you're so strong." So I made sure, a mental note, I was going to go home and have dumplings somewhere.
Yeah.
Wherever I had to go, it was going to happen.
You had to go to Louisiana or wherever you were going to
I was going to try dumplings.
Uh-huh.
I already was a pierogi nut, so I figured dumplings would fit right in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, but Lucky could flip on you at 180 degrees in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
There was something wrong with his brain. Let's just say that. Another afternoon, we had our chow,
mm-hmm.
and basically just relaxing before the night schedule starts. And I'm sitting there, and I sense there's somebody in front of me, and I look up, and there's Lucky. And he's got a .45 automatic pointed right at my head.
Mm.
And the look on his eyes was weird. His eyes were blank. No emotion, nothing. And I'd heard about that kind of thing, but I didn't believe it. Well, now I believed it. So I had my rifle nearby, and there was a magazine in it. It wasn't loaded in the chamber, but it had a magazine in it. So I knew in a pinch it was going to be between him and me, because he hadn't said anything. He didn't draw any attention to himself.
Yeah.
Nobody else seemed to know what was going on. So I thought I better let him know what's going on. So I talked to him. I said, "Lucky," I said, "what are you doing with that thing?" I said, before you can even squeeze the trigger on that, I can load and fire my weapon. And I said, "You'll get 1 round off, and I'll get 18. So why would you even pull that game?"
Yeah.
And I was talking to attract attention, so I could hear the click, click, click of rifles being pointed at him. If he took me out, they were going to take him out. So eventually, he put the weapon down, never said anything. He cleared the weapon, put it in his holster, and walked away. I just got soup from this guy the day before.
Right.
Well, from then on, I was on my guard. A couple days later, same thing. He walks up in front of me, and he's got a grenade. And he's just holding it out to me. like he's
Yeah.
gripping it, but he's holding it in front of me. Well, I'll tell you, from then on, I had my weapon on my lap.
Mm-hmm.
It had a round in the chamber. All I had to do was flip the safety. And I told him, I said, before that goes off, I'll cut you in half. I don't want to do that. Like, you're a friend, you're part of my platoon. I'm here to help protect you,
Right.
take care of you, and teach you. And after a few moments, he put the grenade down in his pocket and walked away again. Well, I went to my lieutenant and reported this. I said, this is twice. I said, no matter what, if he comes up to me again, I cut him in half.
Mm-hmm.
I won't wait. And he says, I understand. So just before this Dodge City thing, the lieutenant said to me, he says, anything happens tomorrow, you got one order. Make sure he goes home in a body bag. And I just told him, can do. Like, there won't be any investigation. I'll make sure of it, you know.
Right.
So my orders for that day were to take Lucky out before getting anybody killed. So we had gone back to the sergeant. I reported the weapons we saw. The sergeant decided to call it in. He's got the colonel on the line. There are no officers around.
Uh-huh.
Half of them are running back to their men because they heard the war start.
Yeah.
So they discounted the order to report to the colonel, and now they're running back. So the sergeant gets the colonel on the line, talks for a minute, says to me, he says, go in, like, penetrate the ville. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to do that, because I'm the one that has to make the hole for everybody else to follow.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, Lucky, who's a grenadier, he's got an M79 and a 45, he takes off running to the spot we had just been. Well, the fact that he exposed himself gave the position of the squad away, much less the whole platoon. And I'm thinking any minute there's going to be all kinds of mortars and incoming fire, to the guys here. So I yelled, take cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I took off after Lucky on foot. So I'm running behind him. And literally my job is to make sure the man never comes back.
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, if I play my cards right, the NVA will do my job for me. And I kind of thought they would anyway. So they opened fire on him first. He took a big burst of automatic weapons right in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So he doubles over and starts to fall down. I've already covered another 2 or 3 steps. Lucky hits the ground. Guess what his M79 did? Came down between his legs when he doubled over. It's pointed right at me. It goes off, hits a few inches behind my left foot. I'm in the air.
Oh, no.
So I'm thinking, well, isn't that a
bitch?
funny joke, like, Lord, are you breaking this comedy scene?
Right,
who's
right.
watching this? So I'm about 12 feet in the air. Fortunately, the only thing that got me was the blast. Shrapnel all went the other way.
So you're essentially uninjured. You're just flying through the air at this point.
I was flying.
Yeah.
I'm like Superman. And I used to pray to do that in church.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I wanted to fly like Superman.
Yeah, well, you got to be careful.
Guess what? That's not as much fun as I thought.
No,
You couldn't control it, So I'm coming down. I put my weapon in front of me to guide me, and when I hit the ground, I slapped the weapon hard and pushed back. So the weapon took most of the shock, and I fell to the ground. And I thought, well, they know where I am, so I jumped up and started running again because I wanted to get the heck out of that way, you know.
Yeah.
And sure enough, for a moment they were stunned. They couldn't believe a Marine just got blown up, you know, flew through the air, and now he's on his feet again. Well, any Marine on his feet is a danger, you know.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they all opened fire again. So there's one guy with an AK who's coming the closest. He fires a burst ahead of me. Doesn't get me. Fires a second burst. The first round hit me in the left leg. Second round went between my legs. And the third round went through my right leg. So I fall down on the ground, and I'm right behind Lucky. He's got two bodies out there. Well, my guys have seen me fall down in front of gunfire before, and I've always gotten up again. So,
Yeah, this time you're not getting back up.
So they're yelling, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm hit." I yelled, "Legs." They yelled, "Which one?" I yelled back, "Both." Well, that wasn't real good.
No.
I mean, with one leg, they figured maybe I could limp away with a helping hand, you know. With both legs out, that meant somebody was going to have to carry me or drag me or something. Anyway, the whole of Dodge City is on fire right now. They're just shooting every which way. Rounds going everywhere. I was literally pinned down to where I couldn't move. And every time I tried to raise my head to see something, more incoming.
Yeah.
Later on, at First Med, when the doctors were working on me, they noticed my left ear had 3 big red marks on it. They said, "What's that from?" And I said, "Bullets." They were very close. So I was getting burned in the ear every time a round went,
Yeah.
singed my ear.
They should have changed your name to Lucky.
Yeah.
Right?
God's Fortunate Son. I like that song, Fortunate Son.
Yes.
That's what I felt like. Thank God.
Yeah.
So anyway, I knew I'd be done for a while. I mean, I didn't know if I'd ever walk again or anything. And my particular World War II hero was a guy named Douglas Potter.
Mm-hmm.
He was a wing commander for the RAF, lost both his legs in a training accident, convinced the RAF he could still fly, and became one of the more successful fighter pilots, flying Spitfires.
Yeah.
Got shot down over France, captured by the Germans, escaped. Of course, he only had one leg. It was like one of his legs got trapped in the airplane, so he bailed out with one pant leg waving around, the other one not. And when the Germans caught up to him, they couldn't believe he had lost an artificial leg.
Mm-hmm.
Then they realized he had another one, and they thought, "Wow, you must really hate Germans," you know.
Right. So when you're shot, where do they take you for an injury like that? Because that's pretty severe, both legs.
First off, it took 4.5 hours.
Right.
To get me out of there. So they propped me up against a tree. One of our other grenadiers carried me out. Guy from Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
Propped me up against a tree. And a corpsman eventually caught up to me, put pressure bandages on. He gave me some juice to drink. Didn't like it. And eventually loaded me on a C-date with about 20 other guys.
Mm-hmm. So you weren't, you didn't require like tourniquets or anything like that then? They hadn't hit any arteries or anything like that?
Well, when I got hit, I knew I was going to be bleeding.
Yeah.
So I shoved rocks underneath my body to use as pressure points to cut the blood flow off.
Okay.
It's the only thing I could do.
Yeah.
And by then the NVA had decided I wasn't going to die right away, so they kept shooting at me.
Yeah.
So I'd done that. I didn't know how well I did it. But turned out I was pretty successful. And then when the corpsman caught up to me, and they were putting pressure bandages on, these bandages had long strings that would tie around like tourniquets.
Right.
So they'd write the time on the bandage so that anybody would know how long it had been tied.
Mm-hmm.
And I was that dumb and happy. I mean, I
was going to ask, like, you just sound like, oh, it's another day. I mean, I guess what are you going to do, right?
I think the heat affected me a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I was even conscious was something.
Right.
Because my eyes were burned. I couldn't see anything. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where my weapon went.
Yeah.
I mean, all that was gone. My pack was gone.
So so after 4 hours, they finally were able to medevac you out, or did they cas-evac you out? Did they carry
I
you
was
out?
pinned down for 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
Then I sat against the tree about another half hour.
Uh-huh.
And they brought the medevac helicopters in.
Okay.
When I flew out of there, I was on the floor of the helicopter with my head propped up against somebody's leg. My head was on my sergeant's lap. He was on it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was actually on the seat, lengthwise.
Right.
So I got my head on his lap. I don't know where he was hit. I'm holding another guy's head in my left arm so he won't fall over. And, I can think of, boy, what a motley crew,
What a mess this is.
You wouldn't paint this picture.
Yeah.
So we flew back to Da Nang Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And 1st Medical Battalion had set up a big hangar to receive us. And they all had us all on gurneys and tables. And at the head of the hangar, they were doing operations under big lights. Navy doctors. So one after another, depending on our severity, they moved us up.
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen a guy with no legs and some other problems, and I thought, well, I've still got legs now. Let's see what happens,
Yeah.
But I had actually told my friend Ray one time. He asked me, he said, "You ever think I'll get hit?" And I said, "Yeah." It said a farmer on the other side of a hill will trip. His weapon will go off, and somehow it'll take out both my legs.
That's sort of what happened. Almost, right?
Almost.
Yeah.
And so I actually, in my mind, I actually thought I might lose both my legs, and I was okay with it. Like, I'll get patched up, and I'll just go on and do what I have to do.
Yeah.
I want to fly again.
Yeah. That's a pretty good mindset. I mean, different people react differently. So to have that sort of mindset probably helped you.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
I was always a pretty much down-to-earth kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I never cared what the obstacles were. I just figured out ways to get around them or over them or something.
Right. Well, you tell that story. I'll share with you really quick. When I was deployed, we fell under the 2-7 Cavalry, the Gary Owen Battalion, and they had Sergeant Major Pippin was our Command Sergeant Major, and they were out, got into a firefight, and he got shot in both legs. Mm. And they medevac him out. He went to Landstuhl, Germany, and then he went back home. Well, he came back during that same deployment.
Wow.
With 2 canes and finished out the deployment. And same sort of mindset was like, this isn't gonna stop me. I'm Sergeant Major Pippin. That guy was scary bad, but he was a great leader, and people followed him. So, when you started telling that story, I'm like, oh, I've met guys like this before. So, yeah. So you get medevaced out. You're thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna have 2 legs or not. And so what happens from there?
Well, I was in first med in Da Nang. We were in a Quonset hut.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scheduled to fly one day, and my temperature was too high.
Mm-hmm.
So they put me off for a day. And I heard the doctor telling a corpsman, one way or another, we got to get him out of here today.
Yeah.
I mean, the chance of infection was much higher in Vietnam than a hospital ship or anywhere else. You know?
Yeah.
So that night, the Quonset hut next to us got blown away by a rocket. And so we were definitely a target.
Mm-hmm.
Next morning, they packed me in ice. They had ice under my armpits and my groin. I was covered up with a sheet, but it just hid the ice bags.
Yeah.
So they came to take my temperature. It was down to 105. I can fly at 105. So they signed me up. The minute the Air Force guy left, they pulled all the ice bags off because I was freezing to death.
Yeah.
Even at 105 degree temperature, it was so cold.
Yeah.
So they put me on a C-141. It's a 4-engine, monstrously big cargo hauler with a drop-down tailgate. So they put me on that. We flew to Tachikawa Air Force Base, Japan. I spent a night there. The next morning, I got a bus ride up to Yokosuka, and they put me in the Army 106 General Hospital. Well, they did that because all the Marine hospitals were full.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the only Marine on the ward. It's a surgical ward, but everybody else is Army. Well, people are staying away from me. I mean, other patients get visitors or talking, the people that work there, nobody coming near me. And I'm sure because the clipboard at the end of my ring probably said something like, "Marine, save your lives, don't get close."
Run away.
And we had a ward chief who was a sergeant.
Uh-huh.
And he came over to me the next morning, and I asked him, I said, "Why won't anybody talk to me over here or check on me or something?" I mean, they were doing medical stuff, but that was it. They do it and they were gone.
Yeah.
So I watched them clean the drain tubes on my legs and repack the wounds, and I knew what they were doing. I had the knowledge, but they wouldn't talk to me. Well, when I got to the Army hospital, they issued me these dark blue pajamas. Everybody else had light blue pajamas. And the sergeant informed me, he says, "Well, dark blue is a psych patient."
Oh, no.
He said, "So these guys are all afraid you're going to get up in the middle of the night and kill everybody."
Why did you end up with dark blue pajamas? Was it just a mistake or something?
Maybe because I was a Marine,
Well, that could be. That could be.
So I said, "Well, what do we do about that?" He says, "I'll get you some new pajamas." So he got me some light blue pajamas, and it was like somebody's turned a switch on the lamp.
Uh-huh.
Now all of a sudden, everybody wants to talk.
Everybody wants to be your friend now that you're not wearing dark blue pajamas.
Yeah. Didn't matter. I wasn't a different person. I just had light blue pajamas on.
Yeah.
So I was one of the crowd, So we're chatting away. And one morning, it was past the time I was supposed to have a dressing change, and there were no medical, what do they call them, medics?
Yeah.
No medics around. And I finally talked to one guy who could kind of walk with a couple of canes. I asked him to push the crash cart over to me, and so now I got a cart full of supplies, so I just did my own stuff.
Yeah.
I flushed out my drain tubes. I repacked the wounds. I put new bandages on, and I was comfortable. And the guy in the bed next to me was an young Army guy. He was a Mexican descent,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a tall guy, had the same kind of wound on my right leg. He asked me if I do his. So I get out of bed, which I'm not supposed to do.
Right.
I hobble around. I drag this cart around the other side of his bed with me, and I start cleaning his wound. And it was cold. I couldn't believe it was cold in Japan. But it was cold, so I mentioned that it was cold, and somebody yelled, I'll get you a coat. Well, they found a white coat in the sergeant's office. They brought it over. I put it on. So now I got a white coat on. I'm working on this guy's legs. And I'm looking down, and there are three pair of shiny black shoes around my paper slippers.
Uh-huh.
With black slacks. So these doctors are watching me clean and the wound and change the dressings. And the head doctor of the hospital is leading two new guys around. And he notices I'm using paper tape on the wound. He says, see, that's a good idea because this and this and this. He's explaining it to the doctors. And I'm moving as slow as I can. I don't want to get caught.
Right.
The guy I'm working on is trying to hold back the laughter. He thinks this is the funniest damn thing he's ever seen. I mean, the whole time I've been there, he's been griping about his wound, asking for pain meds and all this stuff. He's just smiling away like he's having a gay old time. So I looked at him like, not if you want my help. So eventually the doctors walked off. They go on their tour. I finish up, get back, give the doctor or give somebody the coat back to get it back to where they found it, and I climbed back into bed. And I don't think the sergeant ever knew about that. But I proved to myself I could get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
So I must be, and I had a leg that didn't bend. My right leg was atrophied. There was no way to bend it. So I was walking stiff-legged.
Yeah.
And the left leg it was a surface wound, like somebody cut you with a knife, but it wasn't that deep.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't hit a bunch of nerves or veins or anything like that. It was just irritated skin with sutures in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I had one good leg, didn't know anything about the other leg. And I was looking for a wheelchair. I wanted to get out of there. People have been talking about going to the PX and getting chocolate malts.
Right.
And I hadn't had a chocolate malt in 9 months,
It was time.
It was time to go and get a chocolate malt. I had a few dollars. They paid me.
Yeah.
They gave me a few bucks to carry. Well, the chocolate malt was in a PX halfway across the parking lot from the hospital. So the first step of the plan was to get out of the hospital. The second step was somehow to wheel myself down to the PX and buy a malt.
Yeah.
So somebody found me a chair with what they call a leg board on it. So you sat on this board that stuck straight out and you put your leg on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked like a gun sight, and I'm a fighter pilot. I'm ready to go. I got a gun sight. And anyway, another patient sees me. He says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the PX for a malt." He says, "I want to go." I said, "I'll buy a malt." So he gets into another wheelchair. And these wheelchairs were wicker types. They like World War II.
Yeah, they're the old
big wheel
style.
in the front, little wheel in the back, no brakes.
Yeah.
If you couldn't grab the wheel, you were done for. So we thought, well, how hard can it be? So we wheel ourselves down the aisle to an elevator, and we get down the elevator, get to the ground floor. It said ground floor, but the ground floor was raised about a half a floor for flooding or whatever. So now we had to find a way out of the hospital that we could handle. Well, they had a ramp. And the ramp led to a sidewalk that was covered on 3 sides, had a roof on 2 sides, and it led to the women's dorm, the nurses' dorm.
Oh.
So because there are intermittent rain showers that part of Japan a lot. They had tried to protect the women from the rain showers. So this was all wide enough for us to do. So we start down the ramp to the sidewalk. Well, the ramp was steeper than we imagined. Neither one of us had the strength to hold the wheel, so we're speeding down the ramp, laughing like idiots, because we can't wait to see what happens at the end of the ramp, much less the corner that the sidewalk takes 45 degrees to the left, with a wall there in front of us. So we get down the ramp successfully, and I don't know, he wobbled, I wobbled, something happened. Anyway, we tumbled together at the end of the intersection.
Oh no! All heck breaks
So
loose.
we're actually on the lawn. We ended up on the lawn, and fortunately, a gaggle of nurses came around the corner and rescued us. They got us cleaned up, put us back on our wheelchairs. They were going to the hospital. We were going the other way, so we just continued. We got to the PX. Nice little old Japanese guy ran the place. Made some great malts. And while I was there, I thought I better do some shopping. And I saw this little black jacket with a red emblem on it. And it looks, compared to everything else he had, it looked really cool. And I thought my sister Joan would love that. She was the oldest of the two sisters. And I had sent the younger one a pair of pajamas from Da Nang, silk pajamas. And she's kept those all those years. Well, I sent Joan this happy coat. That's what the Japanese call it. And I asked the Japanese guy, I said, what's this emblem? And he says, fire chief. And I said, that's for me. I want that. So that's a good name for her. So I sent her a fire chief jacket, didn't tell her what it was. And like a lot of other things she had, she lost it. God knows where she went, but she left it behind somewhere and it disappeared. So things happen.
Right.
But anyway, we were anxious to get on our way. You know, there was nothing else for us to do there. We'd seen everything. You know, where's the Huey? Let's get the heck out of here. So they were flying Hueys out of the parking lot with patients back to Yokosuka. We got there on a bus, stretchers. So one morning they bundled me up, carted me out to the parking lot, and sure enough, they had a Huey sitting there, and they put me on a rack in the back. And I could see out the window a little bit, but I couldn't study the pilots like I wanted to. You know, if they would let me off the rack, I would have crawled up and got between the pilots like I used to do in Vietnam. So I got a Huey ride out of the parking lot. And I found out later in the week that the helicopter behind us had crashed into the power lines in the parking lot, and the Army decided no more helicopter flights to Tachikawa.
So you were the second to last one to be. Wow. Okay.
The last successful flight out.
Yes, the last successful flight out.
So another one of my firsts. You know? So they put us back on this C-141 Starlifter, and we take off. I was on that airplane for 17 and a half hours. We flew to Alaska. We refueled in the middle of the night. We refueled. And all I know about Alaska is when the ramp went down, it was so dark.
You'll have to turn off airplane mode.
It was so dark that a Jeep approaching us, we couldn't even see its headlights until it got within 100 feet. I mean, it was dark. And we take off from Alaska, and we fly to Nashville in DC, Washington, D.C. Well, some bigwigs that were riding up front in this thing, they get off. Airplane takes off again. We fly to Clark, New Jersey. Finally, they get me off. put me in another Army hospital. Only this time I'm the only guy in the whole ward. Only patient. There's a room behind me somewhere where they've got a bunch of officers.
Mm-hmm.
And I can hear them laughing and talking. And a nurse came by and like the next day and says, "Wouldn't you be happy you're in the other room with your buddies?" And I explained to her, "Those are not my buddies, ma'am. Those are officers." Yeah, I work for a living. I don't know what they do.
Apparently they joke around and laugh.
I mean,
right?
I'm an NCO in the Marine Corps, a corporal. I work for a living.
Yeah.
That's been the standard. I think NCOs run the Marine Corps, you know.
I think NCOs run most branches of the service. Those are your steady people that get the work done.
Yeah, the organizers.
Yeah, that's the truth.
So, and I was looking to be in one of them, you know. Actually, I thought maybe there'd be a chance I could go to officer school in the future and become a lieutenant, you know. And when I was a kid, I used to dream about being an officer in the Air Force, be a pilot.
Right.
Fighter pilot. That's what I wanted to do. And all my heroes were fighter pilots. I knew all the World War II fighter pilots, Pappy Boyington and the whole list of them.
Oh, yeah.
I knew all about them. And the Corsair was my favorite airplane. Crazy looking thing. But boy, it was a hunter.
It did his job, that's for sure.
400 miles an hour. It was a screamer. In fact, the Japanese used to call it whistling death because it had a whistle to it in the dive.
Yeah. So here you are in New Jersey in an Army hospital by yourself, basically.
So I've decided I've got to teach myself to walk. Because there were no wheelchairs around or anything. So they had one of those aluminum chairs with a little, like for an aluminum desk, kind of traditional military. So I got out of bed and I grabbed the chair and I decided I was done with bedpans. So I pushed my chair to the lavatory, used the lavatory, came back, got back into bed. So I kept the chair near my bed. And probably made a couple more trips that way. But I felt really good about it. And next thing you know, I'm getting another ride. Only this time it's a bus ride, and I'm going to Philadelphia from New Jersey. That was kind of a bumpy ride. I wasn't too impressed with New Jersey. And Philadelphia had a lot of trees around it, so that looked pretty good. And the hospital was the oldest hospital I had been in yet. Tachikawa looked brand new. The Army had pretty good hospitals. The Navy had it was USNH number 5, and I think it probably dated back to the 1800s.
It's probably got a nice, deep history to it.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a few World War II admirals that had been there through there. Good people, excellent people, but just an old building.
Yeah.
And it turned out that they had a square behind the hospital. They had another building in it that was older than the hospital. And near the end of my stay there, they decided they were going to move me from the surgical ward to this ward. So in paper slippers, wearing cotton pajamas and a cotton bathrobe, I had to go across a big walk with a big long sidewalk with slush, 3 or 4 inches of snow on it, to this other building. So naturally my feet got soaked. The bottom of my pants were soaked. So I get to the building and I go in and it's colder inside the building than it is outside.
Oh no.
And I don't see anybody. There's like 50 to 100 beds empty, but it had a second floor. And heat rises, so all the guys had gone up to the second floor. And I could hear voices. Well, when I realized the building was cold, I decided they got to have a boiler room. I went looking for the boiler room. I got to the boiler room, and the boiler room was ready to blow. That thing was red hot.
Uh-huh.
And the safety valves were actually bleeding off pressure. Well, that piqued my curiosity, like, why is that like that? So I went up to the second floor, and there were about 20 guys all gathered around radiators that were ice cold. Evidently, they'd never seen a radiator before.
Didn't know how they worked, apparently.
So I went up there and took over. I said, here's what you do. One man to every radiator and do this. And I cranked open the radiator, and they could hear the ping, ping, ping of the water coming through. And they knew the heat was coming. So they were scattered around the room, opening up all the radiators. I said, don't bother with the ground floor. Just do the floor you're on.
Yeah.
I said, the boiler's ready to blow. So if you don't do it soon, the building will be gone. And with that, I went back to the other building, found the chief of surgery, and told him, I'm done with that. Where else can you put me,
Yeah.
And he was a pretty cool guy. I remembered his name for many years. Started with a J. And the first time I saw him, it was almost like the blue pajama thing again.
Uh-huh.
He called me in the office, and he says, I'd like you to see a friend of mine, Dr. Anderson. Well, I knew who that was. He ran the psych ward.
He was the dark blue guy.
And anybody that disappeared into his wing never came back.
Oh.
So I didn't want any part of that. So I asked him, I said, why do you think I need a psychiatrist? And he was kind of surprised that I knew what it was about. And he says, let's put it this way, Don. You've been here a long time, and you've never complained once about anything. Well, back then, I used to get high on Coca-Cola.
Uh-huh.
I drank Coke all day and half the night. You couldn't hurt me with a brick. Why would I complain?
Yeah.
I knew when they were done with me, they're going to send me somewhere and make me happy again. So I said, instead of that, I said, well, sir, I said, I was home to see my family. I came back. I go before a medical board next month. Why would I complain about anything? Seems normal to me. He said, you got a good attitude. I'll put you in the outpatient ward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he did. And I used to, before the day was over, I would go down to the PX in the hospital and buy a bunch of Cokes in these big styrofoam glasses with straws on the side. And I would go to the corpsman and bribe them to store these in the reefer where they kept all the penicillin and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I'd give them each a Coke to put my stuff in it. So, I'd bribe 2 corpsmen, put 2 or 3 Cokes in the fridge, and I'd get up in the middle of the night, wander over, get a Coke, visit with the corpsman, go back to bed.
Yeah. It's a perfect situation.
So I was stoned all the time. I don't know why, but I was. And during the day, since I was an outpatient, I didn't have any surgical people to see me or whatever. I would get up, go find an empty cart, and start hunting around the hospital for TVs. Because there were wards where we had patients, military patients that had no TVs.
Mm-hmm.
And yet TVs were sitting in these unused places. Maybe some were offices, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're just laying around, and I just pick them up, put them on the cart. And in the military, if you look like you know what you're doing, then nobody bothers you.
Yeah.
And I literally walk out the door with a TV and go to another floor and deliver it to somebody who needed one. The guys would thank me, and I'd just wave, you know.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, listeners, we need your help to keep the Veterans Archives podcast going. We're a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes, and we provide this service completely free to veterans. Your support helps us record, share, and archive these incredible stories so future generations never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Every donation, big or small, makes a difference. Visit veteransarchives.org to contribute today. Help us honor their service by ensuring their voices are heard. And thank you for your support, and thank you to all the veterans who have served our country. Yeah, they probably wondered how that even happened. Like that was your job.
And they were always so grateful to get one, you know. And they, wow, we can watch a game show or something, at least something, you know.
Yeah.
And the Mike Douglas show came to the hospital one day, and they had I can't think of her name, but she was a famous ice skater, a dark-haired girl.
Not Peggy Fleming. That would have been later on. Huh.
It was before that.
Yeah.
But people had seen her on TV, so they were happy. And she was very easy to look at.
Right.
Nice girl. And they had a comedian named Marty with this big Brillo head.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. And he was a funny guy. He just cracked jokes left and right. And they also brought a classical guitarist, a Spaniard, who spoke zero English.
Oh.
I mean, nothing.
Uh-huh.
But he went with the crowd, and he was just going to play.
Yeah.
Well, while they were all gathered around talking, I wandered into the solarium, which is a round-shaped room we had at the end of the wing, and a buddy of mine had a guitar, and he was slowly trying to teach me what a chord was and how to play notes. And I bought a book of Bob Dylan music. So the two of us were trying to hammer out Mr. Tambourine Man. And we weren't doing a real good job of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was painful to listen to. Anyway, the classical guitarist heard us plinking away, so he comes in, closes the door,
Mm-hmm.
and he asks, makes a motion like, what kind of music do you have? We showed him the book, and he went, oh, yeah. So he sits down, he looks at the book for about half a minute, closes the book, and played it note for note, much to our amazement.
Right.
And he smiled and left. And the two of us thought, well, it can be done. Why can't we do it? We got the basics. After that, we watched him very closely as he played. So we kind of got and it was only 3 or 4 chords. It was not something overly complicated. You didn't have to go to different positions on the guitar or anything. And years later, I took up classical guitar. I took classes for 3 years and practiced a lot at home. Got my youngest brother interested in it. He's an accomplished guitarist now. He probably owns about 8 of them. He's got custom-made guitars. He was the president of the Michigan Classical Guitar Society for years.
Wow.
My brother-in-law was a member of that, and my brother introduced him to my youngest sister. They got married. So I've had guitars in the family and around me a lot ever since,
Oh, that's very cool.
which is fine with me.
Right.
I mean, I can't do it anymore. I've tried as recently as last month, but I just don't have it. I can't really remember the sequences. I don't even have the ability to hold the guitar and play it at the same time. I had a stroke 2 years ago, and it left my left hand impaired,
Uh-huh.
and I'm left-handed.
Oh, okay.
I can still fire a weapon, I just can't play guitar.
Yeah.
So, and I do go to a range periodically.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun for me.
Yeah, I enjoy shooting as well. It's something that I find relaxing, to be honest with you.
Frustrated guitarist goes home for good. I got retired at 30% disability,
Uh-huh.
and they had a medical board to review my case, and I had an attorney. He was a first lieutenant, brand new, Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
JAD Corps, and his uniform looked really good. He wore it really well. I used to call that a poster boy.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, "You can have me or a civilian." I said, "Sir, I think you'll do just fine." So he says, "Okay, I'll go in front of the board. I'll be back in 20, 30 minutes. Tell you what they think." So he comes back in. He says, "Well, door number 1, door number 2." I said, "Door number 1." He says, "Well, door number 1, they'll promote you to sergeant today. And when you're done here at the hospital in Philadelphia, they'll ship you off to Camp Pendleton, where you'll be an instructor for the next 2 years. You can live off base. You don't have to stand inspections. All you'd have to do is come in Monday through Friday, 8 a.m., teach a class or maybe two classes in the day, and then you're free to go." So with my training and background, I'm going to either teach explosives, jungle warfare, navigation, something,
Yeah.
It'll be a useful course, and I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a lot of experience that I would love to pass on to somebody new. And so I asked him, I said, would I be able to re-up after 2 years? Because I had enlisted on a 4-year enlistment. I'd only done 2.
Yeah.
I said, would I be able to re-up? He says, probably not. But I'd be eligible for promotion above sergeant. I was still thinking about OCS. He says, no, probably not. I said, what's door number 2? Well, door number 2, they'll give you a 30% disability with a VA. That'll cover all your basic medical stuff and anything to do with your legs, of course. And they'll put you on vocational rehabilitation. They'll pay for all your college, 4 years, all your books, tuition, transportation. And I'm thinking, wow, it gets better and better. And generally give you a nice check every month and hope you do well. I said, well, nobody's stupid raised in my family. Send me home.
Mm-hmm.
So took door number 2. So I spent the last few days in the hospital knowing I was going to be going home.
Yeah.
Just waiting for all the paperwork to go through. And late one afternoon, a guy came in and says, how soon can you be ready to go? I said, as fast as I can get dressed. So I had a uniform that had shown up from Okinawa. A sea bag came in, and I actually remembered the combination.
Oh.
So it opened right up, had fresh uniforms, put them on, put my corporal stripes on the sleeves, and I was ready to go. So they put me in a cab, sent me to some office to process up from the Marine Corps. It was one guy in there. Nobody. The whole office was empty. A lot of desks. The guy says, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, I just got discharged. I'm on my way home after so many months like 6 months in the hospital."
Yeah.
He says, "Give me that." So he takes my folder. He actually did all the work. He went and got copies of things and made copies and packaged, stapled it all together, filed it, and actually handed me bus tickets and travel voucher to fly on the airlines.
Uh-huh.
He says, there'll be a cab out front in 5 minutes. He says, you're on your way to Philadelphia airport. And I said, thank you, Sergeant, and out the door I went. So I ended up in Philadelphia, and technically we were traveling standby, but I was there with a corpsman I knew. He was from the hospital, and we were the only passengers on the airline that night.
Oh.
So I called ahead, told them I'll be at the airport at such, about 8:30, and those things. So we landed at, we flew into Detroit in the dark, landed at the Metro. My family was waiting. I introduced him to the corpsman.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't need a ride or anything, so he went on. And I remember I had a sea bag with me, and my brother, Doug, the oldest of the two, was going to carry it. Well, he could barely pick it up. And why don't you let me take that? I just grabbed it and walked with it, So I guess I was stronger than I had been before. I really didn't know how much I had developed, over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And my dad had a bad back. I wasn't going to let him carry it. So we get out the car and took a nice ride home, and I noticed that the car worked exactly as I had seen it before. So I thought, well, I could probably do that again.
Uh-huh.
Still have my driver's license.
It had been a while, though, right? Since
yeah, 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I moved in, got my old bed back, and started with the family routine, getting the other kids up for school and,
Mm-hmm.
getting them fed and stuff. And, of course, I didn't have a schedule. I didn't have a job or anything.
Right.
I wasn't enrolled anywhere. And originally I wanted to go to Wayne State full time.
Mm-hmm.
I figured if I don't do it full time, I'll never get it done.
Right.
I should go and just do it full time. And of course, the war is still going on. It's on the news all the time and TV at night. And Johnson was playing games with the NBA and Hanoi, and they were going back and forth. He was starting big programs.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had Operation Rolling Thunder about that time with the B-52s and everything. And tell you the truth, I really didn't pay that much attention to it.
Yeah.
I had had enough of war. I'd seen it, done it, and I just really didn't see the interest in it anymore.
Sort of time to just move on,
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah, time to take stock of what's going on at home and
Yeah.
make sure my brothers and sisters were okay. So I helped them with homework and stuff like that. And
Did that feel good to, be back in a normal setting?
it was a big pressure release. Yeah.
Yeah.
I slept better. The only thing about sleeping is my mom would tend to wake us up in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And I cautioned her. I said, when you want me to wake up, my toe would be towards the door. And I said, just touch my big toe.
Mm-hmm.
I said, don't play with it. Don't say anything. Just touch it. And she, she's an RN. She's seen me grow up.
Yeah.
She's had to tug at sheets to get me out of bed, that kind of thing. She couldn't believe it. So the next morning she tried it. She touched my big toe and I sat right up, full wide awake. Scared the hell out of her.
Oh, I'll bet it did.
And she looked at me like, what's going on? And I said, that's what we do in the jungle.
Yeah. And don't get up close and personal and try and wake you up. That would be a bad thing.
I didn't live in a hotel. I was in the bush.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I used to eat in the villages whenever I could because
Mm-hmm.
I hated the chow at the mess hall. It was really bad.
The food out in town's always better. I think, wherever you're at. So did you end up going to college then?
OCC. I enrolled in OCC. Well, I tried to get into Wayne, and first I had to take an examination.
Right.
To see, so the VA would know where they put their money. So I went through about a 3.5-hour written test. The results were done in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to wait 2 weeks and come back. So I went back, and the top half of the results was a graph with dots on it. And they connected the dots with lines. Except my lines went right off the page, a couple of columns. And the examiner explained, well, it's a little unusual, but your scores are off the page in a couple of areas. And I said, tell me the areas. And he says, a thirst for adventure and military skills. And I said, I'm just back from Vietnam. What the hell kind of courses or test is this? But we were both laughed about it.
Yeah.
But basically it told him I wasn't going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I couldn't settle down enough to be a doctor. And I was too anxious, or I would probably be too active to be a lawyer or something. I said, what do you want to take? I said, business administration. He says, I can get you that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? The VA lost my paperwork. They couldn't find my records. They couldn't get without my records, they couldn't get my school records.
Right.
Without the school records, they couldn't enroll me. So I was in limbo. So that sessions of classes started without me. So it was going to be till late fall before they could ever get me in again.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm losing IQ by the day.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get something going here. I need to use my mind, And what the VA guy didn't tell me was I could enroll myself, pay for the course, and get reimbursed later.
Yeah.
He never said that. And I didn't think I could afford college without something.
Right.
I had money saved up from the service, but, what am I going to do? So I decided I was going to have to get into the workforce. I'd gone over to a friend's house one morning, waiting for him to get home, because he worked nights at Suburban Ambulance and Providence Hospital as an emergency orderly. And he was training to be an EMT, is what they didn't call it that back then, but basically he wanted to be an EMT.
Yeah.
And so he comes in the door and he's exhausted. He's got on a white emergency orderly uniform, all blood splattered. He's exhausted. And I thought, boy, he looks like me when I get back from some patrols,
Right.
He says, what are you doing here? And I said, I just came over to see if you want to go to Windsor with me. We used to like to go to Windsor, to the restaurants, and tour around. Nice people over there.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me, are you out of your mind? I've been on duty 20 hours. I'm not going to go to Windsor, And I had to, borrow the family car to go over to see him.
Yeah.
If I was going to go to Windsor, it was going to be with him in his car.
Right. Right. And he wasn't going, it sounds like.
So I had to return the car,
Yeah.
Anyway, we got into one of those deals like, oh, you're never going to get a job. And I said, oh, yes, I will. He said, you'll never get it. Well, back then, the newspaper had ads for help wanted men.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, get out the help wanted men section. And I closed my eyes, waved my finger in the air, and I stabbed the paper. I just said, read it. And he says, Wayne Oakland Bank, head teller wanted. I said, that's my job. He said, you're never going to do that. Well, I went down that afternoon and got the job. They were thrilled to have me come in.
That's pretty incredible.
And I worked for the bank for a little over 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And never took a day off I wasn't entitled to, except the first 2 weeks. The week I was supposed to start the job, my face broke out in jungle rot.
Oh, geez.
So my nose and my lip looked like a raw hamburger. Couldn't go anywhere looking like that in the bank.
Yeah.
And I explained the problem, and they were sympathetic. They said, well, call us when you're healed up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hopefully it won't be too long. We'll have to replace you. Anyway, 2 weeks later, I'd been to a doctor, and through the process, I healed back up again.
Mm-hmm.
That had happened before. So I knew it was possible. Anyway, I had 2 weeks of training to learn how to actually do the job. And my instructor was a woman who had been a B-24 pilot during World War II, ferrying airplanes from Willow Run to England.
Well, there's a friendship in the making right there.
I had so much respect for that lady.
Yeah.
And so I thought this job's going to be a breeze. You know, she spent a little extra time with me, kidding around and showing me things, and I caught on like, you don't have to show me things once. I retain it really quick. I'm trained that way, you know.
Yeah.
So they sent me out to Clawson. I'd never even heard of Clawson before. It was straight out Main Street from Royal Oak to 14 Mile.
There's a great steakhouse in Clawson, actually.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful steakhouse. I can't remember the name of it, but I've eaten there.
I had an account there.
Oh, it's amazing. So anyway, you go to Clawson.
So I go to Clawson. So I go to Clawson, and I was a head teller for about 2.5 years. And on the second level of the building was the loan department for Wayne Oakland Bank. The mortgage department was downtown in Royal Oak. The loan department was in Clawson. So we did all the credit referencing. We did all the collections, bill paying. Everything was handled up there. And Wayne Oakland was the last bank in Michigan to go on computer.
Oh, gosh.
So we were still hand stamping everything when other banks would process things by computer.
Uh-huh.
And the Mott family finally decided to loosen up enough money to put the bank on a computer system. Well, they put the computer in the main building. It filled the entire room.
Mm-hmm.
I think a laptop today is probably more powerful than that whole computer was. And it had these master tapes. They had to manually, digitally enter the information onto a magnetic tape.
Yep.
And now the computer would run, the memory would be these tapes running from reel to reel, zooming around. So NCR sold them the computer, and they made a deal with NCR. And the first week they turned the computer on, they had just done the mortgages on the memory. And everything worked fine. End of the day, they turned everything off. Everybody went home. Next day, they turned the computer on. The computer had gone nuts. It spent the night moving money from one account to another for no reason at all.
Oh, no.
And nobody could figure it out. Of course, the tapes were ruined. Well, they had duplicate master tapes of what they had done, but the tapes were in Georgia. So they had to fly an NCR guy down there, commercial airline, get copies made of the master tapes. I think that took a day, and then fly those tapes back up to Clawson. So they did so. Turned the computer on, everything worked fine. End of the day, everybody went home. They left the computer running to update information in it. And the next morning, same thing. Everything's screwed up. And half the tapes erased.
Oh, no.
So at $5,000 each, they had to send another NCR guy down to have new master tapes.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Only this time, the bank said, you stay with that machine until it works. So NCR put 2 guys in the room with it, and they watched it. Well, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the bank closed. $4 the air conditioning turned off automatically.
Oh.
Temperature started going up. By 5 o'clock, 2 guys ran out of the building because they couldn't stand it anymore. Well, nobody had told the bank they got to run the air conditioning 24/7.
Right.
I mean, if the computer's on, you got to run the air conditioning. Well, they didn't tell them that. So the computers were heating up and burning everything up inside.
Oh, no.
It was a very expensive challenge. Finally, they got the whole thing working again. And they actually built a room for the computer that was air conditioned 24/7
Kept it nice and cool.
and never had another problem.
Yeah.
They put the loan department on there and, all the loan accounts and everything. And the at the end of my 2.5 years in downstairs, the vice president from the loan department, Harry Krieger, offered me a job.
Mm-hmm.
He liked the way I worked. He was a veteran. He liked me being a veteran. Moved me up. He had a guy that one of his account adjusters, bill collectors, was leaving the business. Was leaving. He was going to become a roofer, full time.
Yeah.
He had been doing it part time. He had a good history, so people would hire him. Anyway, he thought he'd have more fun doing roofing than collecting. So I took over his department, and there were 5 of us in the adjustment department. Each one had a different group of kind of bills.
Uh-huh.
Like one group might be hospital bill collecting or something. I had secured loans, which included cars, bank accounts. I mean, it was the easiest position in the group, because if you couldn't actually collect a payment, you just charged the account that they had secured the loan with.
Right.
You
Right.
took the money. I mean, the bank got it, but
Yeah.
a car payment would be a different story. If the fastest way to become a pedestrian is stop making car payments.
That's true.
I used that lecture on a few people, and I got the payments.
Yeah.
And anyway, I fit in, and after about 2 weeks on the job, the other guy quit. So I took over his accounts as well. The end of the 3rd week, I'm sitting at my desk reading a flying magazine. Boss comes by, everybody's working, and he asked me, he says, "Have you got all your calls made?" "Yes, sir." "Send all the letters necessary?" "Yes, sir," because we'd send notices or whatever.
Yeah.
And he says, "Did anybody else want any help?" I said, "No, sir. I've asked." He says, "Okay, then." He says, "Well, at the end of the month, we get a report, and we're looking for about he said, the bank would like to see a 5% recovery, but they're really looking for 2 or better."
Mm-hmm.
So they want to see, I mean, you got so many accounts, 30, 60, 90 days, you got to get some money coming in on those accounts in order to do your job.
Right.
I said, "Yes, sir." "Okay, then." Well, the end of the month, they got their report from downtown. There's a Bible this thick of computer paper. And they went through and they got to my accounts and they checked everything, and they decided that the computer was wrong. So they ordered another full report. So they get another bundle in from downtown. And they go through that. They call me to the office at the back of the room. Well, we've been looking at the report on your accounts. Yes, sir. He says, we were looking for somewhere better than 2%, hoping for 5%.
Right.
I said, yes, sir. He says, you came back with a 90% report. He says, nobody has ever gotten 90%.
There's got to be something wrong with that.
Something's wrong with the computer.
Yeah.
And I just sat there smiling. And he says, whatever you're doing, just keep it up. Like, I don't even care what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just keep it up. Because, like, you're making history here. Well, I didn't just call people and irritate them trying to get a few bucks out of them. I asked them what the problem was.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, a lot of the loans I assisted with were furniture loans. And these people would go to like Gorman's Furniture Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Why they didn't go to Sears, I don't know, but they go to Gorman's where everything was twice as much as Sears. And they'd sign for loans on furniture.
Right.
I'd go to their house in Detroit. The furniture would have been delivered from Gorman's, covered in plastic, clear vinyl. So everybody's furniture was brand new, but it was covered in clear vinyl. I had never seen that before in my life.
That's interesting.
But that's the way it was in Detroit,
Yeah. Yeah.
Make your furniture last.
That's right. It's not comfortable, but it looks good, I guess.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay in the banking industry then?
A little over 5 years.
Okay.
And I took courses at night.
Mm-hmm.
I had OCC classes. I had Bank of America classes.
Uh-huh.
Or American Institute of Banking, AIC, AIB. And they were really basic stuff. I mean, it wasn't high tech or anything, but it was information you needed to know to do the job.
Right.
And but I would educate people about their loans, how important credit was going to be with computers in the future here.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it happening. And I said, credit ratings used to be a phone call from one group to another. That I used to do it when I started here. If we had a loan on a customer, we'd say, well, he's been a customer of the bank so long. Will we still believe in him? This and that. And of course, that'd make his credit look better.
Yeah.
I said, with computers, it's entirely different. It's all based on how you paid.
Mm-hmm.
And the computer knows from month to month, every year, exactly how you paid. Were you on time? Were you late a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 30 days, 60, 90, 100? Whatever it was, it's on the record, and that's your credit. Love it or lump it, And I said, so we need to get something structured to make sure you can stay on track.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell me what's going on? And I mean, I sat in a lot of kitchens when I used to make road calls every Monday.
Yeah.
The boss would give me the bank car, and I'd head off, and I could have the car all day. I'd just be out there on the road. And I would take a list of accounts with me and go visit each and every one. And, but I would educate people, and I would sit down and talk to them. Half the time I had the whole family there.
Yeah.
And they'd say, well, I was out of work, for several weeks, and I got hired over here. They have a 2-week delay before you get your first check. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. Now you're working and you're established, right? Yeah. I said, here's what you do. Tomorrow you go to the branch, the Wayne Oldham Bank, and you tell them you want to refinance the loan.
Mm-hmm.
They take an application. They send it to me for a review. I'll stamp it, approved. They'll pay off the old loan, bring you up to date, start you with a brand new loan and a brand new payments. How's that? That'd be great. Okay, that's what we'll do. But you got to keep those payments up.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make that stick. So I was rewriting loans on slow accounts that should have been done half a year before, at
Right.
least. I mean, somebody should have figured it out. So basically, the people they had working there were just plain lazy, or they were just plain stupid.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or some combination.
some combination.
Yeah.
But then again, the management wasn't helping them either.
Right.
So the management was lax. So they still didn't know what I was doing. So I turned in my notice. I got paid by the month.
Mm-hmm.
So Friday was the end of the month. I'd had a new guy started that week, or a replacement.
Mm-hmm.
I took him out on the road, explained what I was doing with people, how to make a successful transfer to this job,
Mm-hmm.
and they only gave you a week, but good luck,
Yeah.
And the bank week was Friday night, and Saturday. You worked till noon on Saturday at least. And when you got everything balanced out, sometimes in my job, you had to make a trip to the main office with all the data.
Yeah.
And so it turns out they were planning a good buy party for me on Saturday morning. I finished it Saturday afternoon because it was the end of the month. And I walked, I went up and thanked both the officers of the business, and said, thanks very much. It's been a good experience. I think I'm going to use it in the future. And they said, well, you're coming back tomorrow. I said, no, sir. I said, it's the end of the month. I'm done. I only get paid through the 31st,
Yeah.
Why would I come back tomorrow? I'm going flying tomorrow.
Right.
By then, I had my private pilot's license, and I was looking for my first weekend off in a long time,
Yeah.
Had a pretty weekend. I was going to fly every day. And either myself or I'd ride with somebody, And I've been sort of attached to the airport. I used to head over there after work through the week, get over there as early as I could on the weekends. And when I didn't actually have an instructor scheduled or training, I'd hang around the airport, pump gas and things like that.
Yeah. So so while you were working this 5 years, you were also getting your pilot's license and flying and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So where did you go from there?
Well, I actually went into retail, which is the one thing my whole family has warned me against.
Right. You should never do that.
My grandfather my dad's dad was a men's clothing retailer.
Yeah.
And way back in the 20s, he actually owned a men's clothing store in Gratiot. He used to outfit the Purple Gang.
Right. And we talked about this the first time we sat down.
Sold them all their suits.
Yeah.
Well, that happened until the crash of 29,
Right.
He lost everything. So he went into sales, just men's clothing sales. And my dad got home from the Army Air Force with a bad knee, so he went into men's clothing. And he did really good at it. He was an expert at fitting suits, custom suits.
Yeah.
He could make an idiot look good. And a lot of his clients got to be sports personalities. Denny McClain, for example. And these guys were huge in different places.
Yeah.
Football players were different than baseball players, and hockey players, were bent, and there was always something going on. But whenever they came to the store, he was the one that personally.
Yeah, because he
fitted them.
knew what he was doing.
Here we go again.
Yeah, it's kind of noisy. I don't know what's going on, but this happened last week, and it didn't pick up on the
Oh, good.
recording at all. So So you go. So
anyway,
did you go to
yeah,
retail clothing then?
No, I went to Scott Coburn's Saddlery.
Okay.
I had met a girl named Sarah Coburn. She was the middle daughter of a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I met her through my friend Joe. He was a student at Wayne until he got his teaching certificate in math.
Okay.
And through him, I met Sarah and her boyfriend, Neil. And the four of us would hang out together, right? I'd go down there, I'd stop at home, change, and drive down to Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to different restaurants, and we were big fans of the, what do they call them? These sort of underground theatrical places and music places. They were in church basements and, nothing risque or anything, but we heard some really good guitarists and flutists and singers and actors, and, it was like the college underground.
Right.
And I was happy to be a part of that. And Joe and I met when I was 21, and he was a little older. And we hit it off. Navy corpsman and Marine. What could be better?
Right. Right. That's not a bad thing at all.
One got to tear apart and the other got to patch it together.
Exactly.
So, but we liked each other.
Yeah.
And he had a pretty cool dog. The dog liked me more than him, actually, sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was around, she never listened to him. She'd always turn to me like, "Is it okay?"
Right. Dogs know. That's for sure. So you through him you met
Sarah,
and then through her you
and her dad owned the Western store.
Yeah.
And while I was still working for the bank, she introduced me to her family.
Mm-hmm.
And within a week, her dad offered me a job. And so I'd been with the bank 3 years, and I told him, no, I can't do it. I said my game plan was to get at least 5 years in somewhere for a reference and see what I could build on it. So he settled down for 2 years. And of course, when it got to be the end of the 5 years, he came back to me and offered me another job again. Be his bookkeeper and sort of an assistant department manager. The money was really good. It was a Monday through Friday job, which I had dreamed about.
Right.
And the hours were reasonable. I could get up, have breakfast, drive to work, have a good day, come home, have dinner, So I took the job. I had a month off between jobs to relax.
Yeah.
Take a break. I'd never taken a vacation out of town or anything like that, so having some time was peaceful enough. Spent most of it at the airport.
Of course.
And flying was interesting. I was flying airplanes that were older than I was. They call them tail draggers. Got a little tail wheel on the back. Got a coffee pot engine on the front, going pop, 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 pop. And airplanes, we call them 70-mile-an-hour airplanes. They took off at 70, they flew at 70, and they went pretty much, final approach was at 70. But a strong wind would blow them around or turn them over or something. So you had to be real careful.
Not much to them.
And I remember one time I was coming in for a landing out to the west, got a good westerly wind, and I was hovered over a parking lot. I had 70 miles an hour on the airspeed indicator, and the airplane wasn't moving at all. I had to dive it to get it down to the ground. Then, of course, I had to figure out if I really wanted to put it on the ground. But, well, there's only so much gas.
Right.
And I figured, well, I'm down to about 30 minutes. I'm going to get this thing on the ground somehow. And I got it on the ground, and I sat in it, waiting for somebody from the office or hangar to notice me, because I didn't dare try to turn that airplane. The wind would have blown it right over.
Oh, yeah.
So they had to get about 3 or 4 guys out, grab the wing strut to walk me back to the hangar with it.
That's frightening.
Yeah, so I had a lot of fun doing that.
Oh, I'll bet.
And the funny thing is, I wasn't in a hurry to get my pilot's license.
Uh-huh.
I had a lot of hours already. I could fly all the tail draggers that the airport had, including one that used to belong to the owner's brother,
Mm-hmm.
and it was called a Luscombe. It was a long, skinny landing gear, and that's prone to ground loop, which would damage the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
So the owner was very careful about who she let fly that thing. Well, my first time I ever flew an airplane, it was a Luscombe. And that was interesting. I was out riding with a friend of my Uncle Bill's. He was the Marine who was a Corsair engine mechanic in China during World War II. And his buddy, I think his name was Leonard, something Williard. So Mr. Williard and I took off in a nice little Luscombe, sat side by side, dual controls.
Uh-huh.
And it was faster than the 70-mile-an-hour airplane. This thing would actually cruise about 90.
Oh, well.
So it was all aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
We were in there crammed really tight together, you know. And but he took off. And my uncle told him I had been flying airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I used to fly these little gas models with a control line.
Right. Not actually in the airplane.
Yeah, you stand in the center and go around in a circle all the time. So you gotta keep yourself from getting dizzy. Anyway, so Mr. Williams assumes I've been up in a real airplane.
Right.
So we take off from Metatol Airport in Plymouth, and we're flying south. And we didn't get as far as Metro. We really hadn't gone very far. And he says, well, would you like to see a stall? I said, oh, sure. So he pulls back the power, pulls the nose up, pulls back the power. The airplane mushes down to stalling speed, and when it stalls, it just drops forward. He saw I was okay with that. He said, you want to do one? I said, yes, sir. So he set me up. I pulled the nose up, pulled the power back. Sure enough, the plane stalled, recovered. Everything's fine again. Would you like to see a accelerated stall? Sure. So he puts the nose down, starts pulling it up. As he's pulling it up, he's adding more power. So now we're getting up steeper and steeper, and we stall. Got to dive down to get airspeed back to fly again. In an airplane stall, the wings stop flying.
Right.
The engine's running fine. It's the wings that quit. So I came through the steep stall. You want to do one? Oh, yeah. So I do one. He says, how about a hammerhead? Well, that's an aerobatic maneuver.
Right.
I said, that'd be great. So he dives it down, accelerates the plane to about 110 indicated, starts pulling the nose up, adds full power, and just when the plane starts to getting wishy-washy, he stands on the rudder and we go right over the top, and now we're staring at the ground and we're flying back down. Want to try that? Yes, sir. So I do it. So now he's getting carried away. He says, how about a loop? Oh, that'd be great. So he dives down, gets airspeed, pulls the nose up, adds power. We go over the top, pulls the power back. The airplane starts accelerating down, flies out, adds power levels up. Want to try that? Yeah, I'd love to. So I do a loop. And the hard thing about doing a loop is to keep it centered as you go over and not do what they call falling out of the loop. because the airplane will, when it starts to mush, if you don't keep it going straight over the top, the inertia wears off and you tumble.
Yeah.
So I do a loop. He says, great. And he's flying in a circle or something, and he says, well, it's pretty much, we better be getting back. And, cause he says, your uncle is waiting. So we're flying along straight level, and he says to, think you can find the airport again? And I said, I can try. Well, I remembered we flew over railroad tracks.
Yeah.
And I could see the railroad tracks, and I hadn't seen any going different directions. So I figured, well, they got to be going one way or the other. So I lined up on the railroad tracks and just kept the nose centered. He says, I'll be there. He said, you're the first one I took flying could ever find the airport again. Well, I never did see the airport. I didn't know what he was looking at.
Right.
Everything looked the same to me.
Yeah.
And he says, I got to ask you. And all the while we're flying, I'm flying, we're going up and down and up and down. And, he says, I can't believe you just can't keep the plane level. And I looked at him and I said, you haven't shown me that yet. And he's looking at me like, I haven't shown you that. What do you mean I haven't shown you that? Like, I mean, you're out here doing aerobatics with my airplane. So we land, and the first thing he does is get my uncle by the collar and says, what kind of airplanes have you been flying? He says, well, those little guys. You told me he flew airplanes. I'm out there teaching him aerobatics. He said, I didn't even have a sick-sack with me. So my uncle asked him, did he get sick? He says, no, he enjoyed it. He says, well, there you go.
Technically, you did fly airplanes. So it is, it's 20 after 1 right now. And I know that your brother's here to pick you up, but you probably need to leave around 1:30-ish. So how do you want to... So typically, the way I wrap this up is I'll ask you, what... When people listen to your story, in the future, what would you like them to take away from that? So,
well,
if you want, we can wrap it up that way.
I actually when I hired him with Scott, he actually gave me the time off to go to helicopter school. It was a 5-week course. And I was entitled to 4 weeks of vacation. Well, he gave me 5, and he gave me it all at once, which was the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So I went to helicopter school, and that was in Wisconsin. And the first thing I did is I asked him, I said, what's the record for finishing this course? They said, we had a guy do it in 4 weeks. Well, that sounded good to me. I did it in 3.
Challenge accepted, right?
And the way I did it was I knew the instructors that taught ground school made more money if they were flying. I mean, there was a big difference between the way they logged their hours.
Yeah.
So what I said to them was, look, I'm a commercial pilot. I can teach ground school, except the helicopter part. I can teach navigation, radio, weather, FAA regulations. The only thing I can't tell them is about the helicopter flying legally.
Right.
Said, so why don't I do this? I'll take your ground school classes, and you give me an extra hour of flying every day. There might be 2 classes. I'll take them both. Just give me an extra hour of flying that I'm paying for already anyway.
Right.
I mean, the government is. The government pays 90%.
Yeah.
On the GI Bill. So it was only costing me 10 cents on the dollar to fly helicopters. And so I had 2 instructors, and ground school instructors, they both did that. So I ended up being the ground school guy. Well, these guys were out making money teaching students helicopters. And in the meantime, I got extra flying time, which is what I wanted. So I was up more times. I flew more different the helicopters were pretty much identical. They were all Bell 47s. but they were different G miles. There was a 2, a 3, and a 5.
Mm-hmm.
The 5, of course, would be the most advanced, highest horsepower. And that was my favorite. But it wasn't always available.
Right.
And so I'd find the others, they flew pretty much the same. It turned out, as a fixed wing, I was already commercial fixed wing.
Mm-hmm.
They would rather start with somebody that had no flying experience than a fixed wing pilot, because fixed wing pilots might instinctively do something contrary to what the helicopters need.
Right.
I didn't have that problem. When I got into that program, I adapted completely to the helicopter. Pretty much forgot everything I knew about fixed wing flying. At least in the back of my mind I had.
Right.
But I paid no attention to it while I was flying the helicopter. And the big test was one day I was arrived the instructor, and our job was to fly maximum performance takeoffs. So we were flying out of Rock County Airport, Janesville, Wisconsin. We would fly to an unused portion of the airport near some trees,
Mm-hmm.
and we would take off vertically in front of the tree line. So we're going more up than forward. And helicopters need wind speed or forward motion to really get into a more dynamically stable flight.
Yeah.
They call it translational lift, where the blades actually become more effective because they're getting more air from the front. But until then, they're generating all their own lift and nothing for the front at all. So it takes a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
So you fly the helicopter up, and these trees were about 30 feet high. You fly up, and as you reach the top of the tree line, you would pitch over and move forward. And when you hit about 13 miles an hour airspeed, you would feel the blades all of a sudden like getting a big umbrella. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, they're really efficient. And you could actually back off the power and maintain your altitude. And the helicopter would be accelerating.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't seem like any big challenge to me. Basically, you were holding it straight with a tail rotor until you got up to sight and height and tilt forward. No big problem, right? So I'm doing this for the first time, right? There's been no demonstration. We've just discussed it.
Yeah.
I take off. I'm climbing in a hover. He says, "Okay, go." Climbing up, watching the trees go by. And just as I'm starting to pitch over, the whole plastic bubble goes black. The sky is gone. Can't see a thing. The instructor has never seen anything like that. I've never seen anything like that. Instructor is on, I mean, he's not really on edge because he trusts my flying by this time. I've already got about 20 hours in flying. So now they're just showing me the fine points of things. So he knows I can fly the bird. And his hands are near the controls, but they're not on the controls.
Mm-hmm.
The whole screen goes black. His mind goes blank. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
So my instincts were really good. I did what they call a quick stop,
Mm-hmm.
where you pull the nose up and you flatten the blades down to form a cushion to stop you in midair. But you normally do that when you're flying forward to avoid hitting something.
Right.
I'm in a climb already, or I'm on the edge of a climb. I'm really not going forward that far, but I'm still going to stop the helicopter where it is.
Yeah.
So I brake the helicopter. I've got the collective bottom, the power's off, or the power's on just enough to keep the rotor blade in the green RPM range.
Yeah.
I want to keep the blades efficient. So I've got just enough power going to do that. And the helicopter pauses for a moment, and all of a sudden, the sky is back. And I mean, if you blinked, you missed it. And of course, now we're pitched up near vertical over in front of 30-foot trees.
Yeah.
What do we do now? I mean, that helicopter's not going to hang there for long.
Right.
So I stand on the left pedal, spin the helicopter around 180 degrees. Now I'm diving down exactly the way I came up. I pull the full pitch, add power. I flare the helicopter, and I'm right back in the hover where I started from in just seconds. And the constructor was by now a good friend of mine, named Bob. He says, "What was that?" He had no idea. And I said, "Well, let's put it this way. Somewhere a mile away from us right now is a frogman hanging from a kite being towed by a boat whose black neoprene suit is full of something brown and gooey." Because I saw his eyes as those blades flashed by right in front of him.
Right.
We almost hit the thing.
Wow.
And turns out there was a river in the tree line. And these idiots decided it'd be fun to tow a kite behind a boat through there. You know, because it zigzags, so the guy in the kite would get a ride.
Yeah.
So this guy's in Gomer goggles. I mean, it looked like a Japanese pilot. You know, Gomer goggles, a black suit. And he was not having a fun day.
No,
He nearly got sliced and diced by rotor blades. And I would have hated to clean that mess off the windscreen, I'll tell you.
Oh, no doubt.
So anyway, the instructor decided that was enough of that lesson. I didn't need to learn anything.
Yeah, you learned way more than you thought you were going to get that day.
It was a test we didn't intend, but unfortunately it came through.
Right, exactly.
And of course the main thing was to keep the rotor blade in the green. The tachometer had a space like this big. That was the green range that your blades were working, or they weren't working.
Right.
They're either too fast, bad, or too slow, definitely bad, because there wasn't enough power to get any RPM back. But with the dive, it came right back, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so they soloed me and let me fly the thing around and play with it. And I practiced emergency maneuvers more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, including auto rotations and things. And I loved auto rotations. I had a ball doing that stuff. And on the Bell, all the powers are hydraulic. And one of the tests is to turn the hydraulics off like a pump failure and land the thing with the hydraulics off. Well, when the hydraulics are off, your cyclic stick is like cemented in stone. I mean, it's no longer boosted.
Right.
Helicopters don't have any feedback. I mean, you fly by positioning the stick.
Yeah.
That's a big difference with airplanes. Airplanes, you feel pressure. Every time you move a control, you feel the resistance and you know what's happening. Helicopter, you don't feel it, but you know from the position what's going to happen. And if you can get used to that, you can learn to manage the machine. And I loved it. I thought it was a great way to fly.
Yeah.
And then they gave me a chance to fly a Bell 206, which is called a Jet Ranger. And that was like luxury model compared to compared to a go-kart, you know.
Right.
I mean, that thing, everything was automatic, and it's all hydraulic, and I mean, it could do things as fast as you could think of something. The helicopter already did it.
Yeah.
It was that fast, and you could fly that thing so smooth. You know, I mean, I made turns and landings that I didn't think were possible in those kind of machines, except with this kind of model, you know.
Right. Right.
So I've been a big fan of helicopters I quit flying them after, years ago, but I still keep up on what's flying today and what they do and who makes them and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I actually have a CN here named Kimberly, who has a daughter who works for Sikorsky and works on the rotor head designs.
Oh, well, that's
I'd love to spend a day with her, just talking.
I'll bet. You
Yeah.
could probably learn a lot from each other.
Yeah.
You could. Well,
Anyway, my business career, I became a car salesman. Well, let me finish with Scott. So I told Scott I'd work for him as long as I was learning. At the end of 8 years, I figured I was due for a change. And I had a friend who was starting a trucking and air freight business in California. And I decided to help him. And I told Scott I was going to be leaving. And he asked me why, and I told him, well, I stopped learning.
Yeah.
Like, I revitalized your company here. I was his bookkeeper for 4 years. And in that time, I helped him acquire the financing to buy a lot and build a new business, twice the size of what he was renting in downtown Farmington. So we built this place in Livonia, Farmington Road and 8 Mile, still there. And 12,000 square feet. I helped design the building. One major innovation was I wanted the drain pipes from the roof run down inside the building. Because on the old building, the drain pipes would ice up, the water would back up on the roof and freeze. So, which would cause the roof to crack, which then meant leaks when the water came back.
Right.
And so it was a constant nightmare. So I discussed it with the engineers for the new building. And within a week, they were calling me and saying, can we use that on our building now? I said, go for it.
Right. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Why ask me?
Yeah. So did you move to California then?
Yes.
Okay. So you went out to help him get this business set
When I
up.
went up, I knew nothing about trucking, but I was willing to learn anything.
Yeah.
I knew about business and the business laws, at least in Michigan.
Right. So how long were you in California for?
Half a year.
Oh, okay.
I was with my friend. Occasionally, we'd make truck runs together. I'd go on as a co-driver, and he was like an instructor. And one experience was we were down in Southern California near Calexico, and there was a plant down there that processed a powder that looked like borax.
Yeah.
And it was a product that was scraped off the desert. They literally had machines out there that would scrape this stuff up. They sent it back to the plant where it was refined. And then these other container trucks would come in and pick it up. Well, we were hauling 40-foot containers out of LA Harbor. So you had to go to the harbor, you had to get a chassis, you had to go next door to get a container, and then you had to take it wherever the orders were to get it filled,
Right.
and then drive it back to the harbor again. So containers were coming and going all day long, and they ran business hours. It started early, went to mid-afternoon, like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they closed.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't get in by closing time, too bad, because those people in the yard went home. So, big business that ran by business hours. Incredible. So we went out to this plant, and we were hoping that we'd get the job done soon enough to be able to do another job. So if we ran 2 jobs a day, we'd actually make a little money.
Yeah.
We pay for the truck, pay for insurance, everything else, beat our expenses, and actually put a little money in the plus column. But you had to do 2 runs to do that. One run didn't always do that. So we get to the plant. We're still in the early afternoon, and the whole town is covered with this stuff. It blows around, and it's corrosive. They've got a fire department that washes their equipment twice a day, every day, no matter what, because the hoses on the trucks will get eaten up if they don't clean it off.
Right.
And the windshields start to go looking funny. So anyway, so we get to this place, and there's about 70 trucks ahead of us. All have containers on them. Containers open up at the top. So we're like the last in line, you know. But the trucks started filling the parking lot from the back. So the first guys are all in the back. So we're parked right up front. And it's not looking good. It's looking like we might not get out of there for 2 days.
Yeah.
And we could sleep in the truck. I mean, there's a bed in the back, but there's no kitchen or anything. You know, what are you going to do? So anyway, trust that old clipboard. He gives me the clipboard with all the paperwork on it. It says, check us in. Like, good experience for you.
Yeah.
So I get out of the truck, and I'm standing third in line. The guys ahead of me are being told, well, the problem is we don't have anybody here who's familiar with the layout to guide you through. The guy that has the job is homesick.
Oh boy.
The guy that does the other shift is on vacation, and they can't raise him. He left town. He's out. He's not far away, but nobody can get him.
Right.
Who knows what he's doing? Maybe he's got a boat. Anyway, and of course, in the meantime, I'm hearing this lady on the other side of the counter, who is armed, by the way. Why they're all armed, I don't know. I mean, did somebody try to steal borax? It makes no sense.
Right.
But everybody, the people in this building were heavily armed. But she's talking to her about her son playing baseball with a guy. Anyway, by the time she gets to me, I've got enough background to greet her by name and say, how you doing? It's been a long time. She looks up at me blankly because she'd never seen me before.
Right.
I'm wearing aviator sunglasses, I got gray hair. Oh, yeah. Kind of one of those things like, who am I talking to?
Right.
And I started asking about her son's team. I said, is he still in this league? Oh, yeah. I said, well, what's position he's playing now? Because he had first base. Well, yeah, he's done really good. He's doing this and doing that. And she's all excited. Well, of course, I've distracted her.
Right.
And I said, what's the holdup on all these guys? She says, oh, this and that with the two guys. We got the guy else. I said, well, I'll lead them through. And she says, really? You'd do that? I said, sure. So she stamps all my stuff real quick, says, God bless you, So I'm walking back to the truck, and I hold my hand up, and I go, and all of a sudden, 70 trucks all come to life, It's good news. So I get in the truck with my buddy. He's looking at me like, what the heck? And I said, well, here's, they had to hold up. A guy can't lead them through, blah, blah. I told him we'd do it. He says, oh, well, how are we supposed to do that? And remember, I told you the whole town is covered with this stuff.
Right.
And I looked him right in the eye and I said, you can follow tracks, can't you? And of course, there were truck tracks going right through the plant.
Well, yeah.
Bam. We had that load in 5 minutes and we were out of there in 10.
Perfect.
I don't know how long it took the other trucks to get through there, but...
Got yours done.
Yeah. They were all lined up behind us.
Yeah.
So we smoked our way through that one.
Yeah. So did you come back to Michigan then after you...
I did.
There? Okay.
I came back to Michigan, and I probably could have gone back to the salary, but I didn't want to. I wanted a job with more financial opportunity.
Right.
Airplanes were getting expensive, and And
So you decided selling cars was the way to do
yeah,
that?
I wanted to try car
Yeah.
sales. I had an uncle who had been in car sales pretty much all his life, and he went in the Coast Guard, came back, got into it again. He had one dealer he worked for, Ted Ewald, and he got treated good. He had a excellent follow up.
Yeah.
You know, referrals are the big secret in that business.
Right. It's
So
not just a
if you're
single
in one
car
place
sale.
for years, you build those referrals up.
Yeah. Well, how long did you stay in car sales?
About 8 years.
Okay.
I got into car sales. First started, I really couldn't get foot in the door. Nobody would hire me.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to part 4 of our 5-part series with Don Roach, who served in the United States Marine Corps. That's a wrap for this episode of the Veterans Archives podcast. We truly appreciate you taking the time to listen and honor the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Don't forget, you can catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream past episodes anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and as I've said before, any place you can find a podcast, you can find the Veterans Archives podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share our content on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and across all social media. Every share helps us reach more people and preserve more stories. The Veterans Archives podcast is a nonprofit initiative, and our mission is simple: to give veterans a voice and ensure their stories are never forgotten. This service is completely free for veterans because their sacrifices deserve to be recognized and remembered. You want to help? Follow us, spread the word, and if you know a veteran with a story to tell, send them our way. Visit us at veteransarchives.org to learn more about how you can get involved. Thanks again for tuning in, and most importantly, thank you to all the veterans and their families for their service and sacrifice. Until next time, take care, and we will see you on the next episode of the Veterans Archives podcast.